105.9 Academy FM.
The sound of Folkestone.
A consultation for a new parking strategy has been put forward by Shepway District Council. The proposals include pay and display charges to be introduced in the town centre, new time limits for parking on certain roads and residential and business permits. I spoke to Bob Porter, the Head of Health and Housing at Shepway District Council, to find out why the council have commissioned a consultation and what they wanted to achieve with it.
Three things really we wanted to set out to try and achieve with our parking strategy. The first one is around making it easier for residents to park close to where they live. We also wanted to help increase the number of available parking spaces in our town centres so that if shoppers want to pop to the shops quickly and make a quick purchase, they can find somewhere convenient to park near the shop they want to go to. And the third thing we really wanted to work on is our car park charges in our car parks. We know that at £1.20 an hour, they are too expensive at the moment, and we wanted to try and find a way to reduce those charges without the costs of that falling on local council taxpayers. What we really wanted to do was find out what people think about the proposals.
Kay McLaughlin from the non-political group of local businesses and residents Keep Shepway Streets Free cannot understand why the consultation has happened and is concerned it will affect local businesses.
My views on it, and I think that most of the community, most of the local residents and the local businesses, is that we can't understand the justification for the strategy, and we can't understand why they're spending so much money on pursuing an idea that no one seems to want and no one seems to like. If they start putting meters in, people won't want to add that extra cost to go and buy their lunch. You can get an hour free in a parking bay, which is perfect. If you want to pop in, get a few things and go. And the turnover in them parking spaces is brilliant. I've got a friend who's got a local business. She runs a sandwich shop, and she said that it keeps the traffic moving, the cars move, people come in, get their lunch, they go. It's simple. It's not an issue. It's not a problem.
So how will that actually affect businesses in the area?
We believe that it's going to cause a lot of businesses to close up, because if you can't get the customers, then you can't keep your business running. It's simple. It's not rocket science, is it?
Does your group believe that it's going to take people's business elsewhere? Are people going to be using the larger supermarkets where they can park for periods of time if they are shopping there, and just use those for their shopping?
Yeah, of course. Of course people will go. They must be, the people on the big supermarkets who are on the big retail parks out of town and the shops there must be rubbing their hands with glee, because they know that people, if they've got the choice, will go, oh, we'll just go there, it's easier. I'm not paying however much they want me to pay just to go into town when I can go to a free car park and then don't have to worry about the stress of running back so I don't get a parking ticket.
Is there any alternatives that you as a group have discussed to this option, other ways for the council to make money using parking?
But there's not an issue to begin with, so why have an alternative? Let's just carry on. It works perfectly. If anything, I would have said, let's try and encourage more people to come here by offering free parking in car parks at the weekend. Surely, if there's free parking, people will come down here for a weekend or the whole day. The money you would have spent on parking, you would then spend in the town. You could come down on Saturday morning, park up, go shopping, then go and spend money for lunch, and then go and have a look around and spend more money. And all that money is going into our town, which will then generate more businesses to come here because they can see the footfalls increased. And, that's just common sense. An incentive works. Making people pay for things that's already free isn't an incentive. All you're doing is driving people away. People will go somewhere where they can get free parking.
Bob Porter agrees local businesses are concerned.
I know the retail sector particularly have been concerned about the risk that on-street charges would discourage shoppers from visiting town centres, and that's something that clearly we don't want to happen. It was never the intention of the strategy to drive shoppers away, but to make it easier for them to park. So clearly those views are something that we need to listen to and consider when we make a final decision.
Because at the moment in the town centre there is places where you can park for free for short periods of time. With the introduction of charges, if that does happen, and on street in the town centre there will now be a parking meter, is it a possibility that people may then go to a supermarket where the parking is free and move away from actually going locally?
I think the thing is, and I know I've tried myself in my car to pop into a shop in Sandgate Road, which is one of the key areas where we've had a number of businesses objecting to the proposals. If you want to pop into a shop in Sandgate Road and find a parking space for 10, 15, 20 minutes to do that, it really is quite difficult at the moment, and there really very often isn't anywhere to park in Sandgate Road. So whether it's free or whether there's a small charge...
Will charging affect that, though? Is that
how
will that sort of make a difference to availability for spaces?
The idea, and it's been successful in other districts, and I know that's not the only way of achieving it, but the idea of charging is that the driver then controls how long they use that space for, and if they only want that space for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then they only pay for 10 or 15 minutes, encouraging them then to move on more quickly so that it can then be used by another visitor. So that isn't necessarily the only way of achieving a higher turnover. And one of the reasons why we want to listen to what the businesses have to say is to see if there are any other suggestions that they have. But certainly the evidence from other districts is that on-street charging, particularly if the charges are set at an appropriate level, can encourage a higher turnover of vehicles.
There has been a review conducted recently by Mary Portas for the government, the future of our high street and town centres, and she's recommended that reducing parking charges should happen in town centres to try and get more people in. Is that something that Shepway District Council are going to consider?
Well, absolutely.
Review?
And one of the things that we set out in our strategy, and one of the things we want to achieve, is to find a way of reducing the charges in our car parks. And we know that £1.20 an hour is too much and is out of step with the charges in other providers' car parks in Shepway, and out of step with some of our neighbouring districts. So we want to try and reduce those charges and make it cheaper for visitors to our town centres.
I understand that currently less than 10% of the parking capacity is used. Does that not show the council that people would rather avoid paying for parking if they can?
I think it is about driver behaviour, and we want to try and encourage drivers where possible to find parking spaces that are off street, so that those spaces on street closest to the shops can be used for people that really do want to pop in for a quick visit.
I asked both Kay McLaughlin and Bob Porter about the need for residential permits and how they will affect people working in the town centre.
Well, they're proposing that they bring in permits so people have got problems parking in their road. Now, yeah, that's a brilliant idea, but what they're neglecting to tell people is that they're not guaranteed a parking space in their road. You could have a permit, never guaranteed a space to park there. And also, they're going to issue visitors' passes. Now, there's only a certain number of visitors' passes that are going to be issued. If you have a big family event, or say you have tradesmen coming to do work at your home, that little number of permits are going to go. So what happens when they run out? Is that it? No one can come and visit you anymore. So the council are dictating how many people can come and visit you, starting to make permit resident areas, making pit parking meters. All you're doing is shifting cars to places that are free. People will look for free roads, and people that never had a problem parking in their road before will then end up with a problem.
We've only consulted residents that are within the Phase 1 area, which is Folkestone Town Centre and the seafront and the Stade. We know that some of the residents in that area are particularly keen on resident permit parking, and we've had representations previously from residents asking us to do permit parking in those areas.
But it wouldn't guarantee spaces, would it, with parking?
It doesn't
permit?
guarantee a space, no, but it does give priority to residents so that they are more likely to find a space. In some of the areas around the town centre in Folkestone, we know that there's also pressure on resident parking, and groups of residents in those areas have also asked us for permit schemes. What we have said in the strategy is that where residents come forward and ask for a resident permit scheme, and there is support from the residents, then we would consider those.
Is there a danger that perhaps residential areas that aren't included in Phase 1 are going to see more traffic because people are going that bit further out to avoid parking when the first phase comes in, and therefore it's going to mean residents can't park, well, they can park even less, and also it's more traffic running through their area?
Yeah, there's always a risk if you introduce new parking restrictions that the way drivers respond to that might not be quite what you expect. So, if there is increased pressure on some of the roads around the town centre, then that's something we can keep under review. So if those residents want us to do something and introduce permit schemes in those areas, we can. In some of the roads around the town centre, particularly towards the western end of Folkestone Town Centre, some of those streets are already very heavily parked, and there's a high degree of congestion. So residents already find it very difficult park close to their homes. And those streets are included in our Phase 2 proposals for next year. Also, there are people working in the town that perhaps drive to work and need somewhere to park their car. And at the moment, the only places really where people working in the town can park are either in car parks or in residential streets around the town centre. So as well as trying to reduce the charges in the car parks, which will obviously have benefit for people using them during the day, perhaps for work. We're also trying to introduce new season ticket arrangements that would offer significant savings for people working in the town.
Even with significant reductions with a permit for people working in the local area, it's still more expensive than it is to park for free. Are people that are working in local shops or even small business owners, are they going to be able to afford to do that?
Well, that's really about how we set the pricing. And I know some of the local businesses have raised concerns that their staff wouldn't be able to afford our current season ticket prices. And we're willing to look at that, and that has formed part of the consultation. So, for example, as well as reducing the overall charges for season tickets for people working in the town, we might also be able to consider, for example, bringing in part-time season tickets for part-time workers, so offering even further reductions in price. So it really is about ensuring that we price that correctly so that people can afford it. But of course, one of the main aims of this is to encourage more drivers to use off-street car parks so that we do relieve some of the pressure in residential areas.
Also on the consultation, it's discussed different reasons why this has sort of come about, one being the appearance of local neighbourhoods. How is charging going to affect that? Because surely the parking spaces are there, and whether you charge or you don't, those parking spaces are still going to be used. So the appearance of how many cars are parked won't actually make any difference.
I think one of the issues about appearance of the neighbourhood is about unnecessary signs and reducing the number of signs. And where we can, we would want to reduce the number of signs to a minimum to kind of reduce the impact on the street scene. So it's those kinds of issues more than necessarily having a greater number of parking spaces that aren't used. I mean, clearly, as we're not increasing the number of parking spaces overall by very much, they're still going to continue to be used.
Kay McLaughlin discusses the traffic and parking congestion.
You know, the system works. They said that there was traffic congestion originally. There isn't traffic congestion in Folkestone. I come from London. I know what traffic congestion is. You know, if there's 3 cars in a row here, they think it's a traffic jam. You know, and then they changed it, say, no, we didn't mean traffic congestion. We meant parking congestion. Oh, so what you're saying is that there's people parking in the parking bays that the parking bays are there for. Yeah, well, that's why you have parking bays. And if there is a time limit, that's fine. Everyone's happy with those time limits. You know you have to go back in that time. If you get a parking ticket because you've gone over that time, then, you know, the only person responsible for that is you. That's acceptable. You have to accept that.
I discussed with Bob Porter if the amount of opposition from local residents, businesses, the MP and some councillors would affect the result of the consultation.
The key opposition has been around the introduction of on-street charges in retail areas, particularly in central Folkestone, Sandgate Road and Tontine Street, those sorts of areas. And those views will, of course, be taken into account when the decision's made.
The costs involved in this, with the different phases, new permits to be produced, new parking meters, is that going to be cost-effective?
As far as, you know, the kind of on-street charging and if there is any, and ticket machines and so on, I mean, clearly that does have an installation cost, and we've looked at those costs. You know, over time we would expect the income to cover those costs and generate some surpluses. Any surpluses generated from that then can be reinvested in either future schemes or transport improvements. And in fact, the legislation around on-street parking requires councils to spend that money on transport improvements in their area. So we do think that over time it would fund itself and also allow us to bring some resources to improve transport where we can.
So how many people have come forward to tell the council they do not want the changes, and who are they from?
We received over 500 responses from members of the public to the consultation.
Does that include petitions, or is that
separate? No,
the
petitions are separate. We've had petitions as well, and we've had representations from the business community in addition to the formal consultation that we ran. And we'll be looking at all of those things and putting together the key points from all of those sources of information. What we really wanted to do was find out what people think about the proposals.
Kay McLaughlin says the whole consultation has been a waste of money.
Why they're spending so much money on a consultation that they're not legally obliged to take any notice of, which could be about 40,000 approximately. They've no legal obligation to take any notice of the decision of that consultation. Who has got the final say-so on whether this is a yes or a no? How do we overturn this decision? You know, it surely can't be one person. One person cannot have that much power in a democracy to say, yes, we're going ahead. What does it take for them to realise that no one wants this? There's no justification for it. There's no evidence to support it. It's just a pure money-making scheme, and that's all it is. And the only reason that they're still carrying on with it is nothing but pure arrogance.
The consultation has now closed, so what happens next, and when will a decision about parking charges in Shepway be made?
We're scheduled to make a decision in May, the council's cabinet meeting in May. But before then, there'll be an opportunity for other council members not on the cabinet to have a discussion about it as well and have their view heard too. Really, at the moment, we're analysing all of the responses to the consultation. We'll be preparing a report summarising all of those, and council members will have the opportunity to discuss that in full before they reach the decision about whether to go ahead with charges or what sort of scheme they might want to introduce. The strategy always intended to be a set of proposals in 3 phases with detailed consultation at each phase before we decided to introduce anything.
Will there be a consultation again following phase 1 to see the effects of that and whether actually perhaps phase 2 wouldn't work as originally thought?
Well, obviously phase 2 will have its own consultation with the residents and businesses that are within that area, and anything we learn from phase 1, well, obviously we'll carry that forward and make sure we learn from it. But it may be that there are some unintended consequences of any changes that we make, and we'll keep those under review. And if we need to change anything subsequently in the future, we always can.
Once the decision's been made after the consultation, can that be reversed? Can changes be made after the decision's been made in terms of people wanting to petition because they don't agree with it, or is when the decision's made, it's made?
Well, the decision will be made in May, and whatever is decided at that point, we'll take that scheme forward and introduce it. But if in the future the views of the public change or the needs of the district change, then there's no reason why we can't come back and change parking restrictions subsequently. So, you never say that once it's in forever, because these things can always be reviewed.
I'm Sarah Carre for Academy FM, talking about the recent parking consultation by Shepway District Council.